last year at Holliday's inaugural TVnext hack. 80 developers gathered at Holliday's Boston headquarters for a weekend of coding, hoping to create the next big TV app. 5 teams went on to the final pitch in front of hundreds attending Holliday's TVnext Summit. In the end, it was 17-year-old Jenny Lemire with her spoiler blocker Twevo who captured the audience's hearts and votes. Within 24 hours, Jenny's TVnext hack story went viral, including press coverage in Fast Company, US News and World Report, NBC, and on Good Morning America. This year, we did something a little different. We partnered with Hack MIT, where students from all over the world had the chance to develop a next-generation TVnext app. 15 days ago, we chose 5 finalists at MIT, who today will try to win your votes for a $2,500 grand prize. Who will be this year's winner? Who will decode the future of TV? It's now up to you. This is Holliday's TVnext hack. And here are today's judges. From Mashable, Christina Warren. NextView Ventures, David Beisel. Fast Company, Teressa Iezzi. And returning judge, VH1's Dave Perry. Excited about this judging panel this year. We got 2 superstar journalists and reporters, we got a venture capitalist, and we have a great, awesome, and very friendly television exec, Dave Perry. This is a developer's dream to be in front of this panel and, of course, all of you here and on our live stream. Speaking of which, I want to let you all know now to definitely log on to tvnextsummit.com/social, because it's going to be this audience and our virtual audience that will be choosing the winner of the $2,500 grand prize. So be sure to load that in now so that when the poll pops up for you to vote, you're ready to go and make that happen. Dave, you were here last year when Jenny won and took the stage by storm. What were your reactions to that moment? What were you thinking?
I thought she made the best product, and for me as a person in television, also as a user, it's a real problem, and which is the idea she came up with is how to suppress spoilers and certain hashtags so you could enjoy the show time shifted. I think that's a new new platform for me to focus on, which is how do you engage viewers not just during the live programming. So I thought that was a really good idea.
We caught up with Jenny, and I think it's important to know, too, that last year's TVnext was actually a year and a half ago. And so about 2 weeks ago, we got together with Jenny, talked to her about what she's been doing over the past 18 months. Let's take a look.
It was really crazy when I won the hackathon last year because going into it, I wasn't expecting to even win in my category. So to win not only in my category, but out of the other 5 categories was just completely unreal. It was just, the whole event was really fun. It was really weird getting all this press attention out of nowhere. It was completely unexpected that everyone wanted to hear about the little app that I had decided to make. I was able to be in the March edition of 17 magazine in the top 5 ways to show people to look beyond your age. In the winter, I was nominated for a NET Award. The hackathon just really helped start my career as a software engineer because I was able to get an internship at Twitter out of it. I'm on the Crashlytics team, which is part of the mobile platform group at Twitter. I didn't expect to get an internship at a top tech company coming out of high school. I know how much going to hackathons changed my life. A lot of high school girls don't go to hackathons because they don't even think of that as something that they would want to do. We have this Women in Computing hackathon at my school where we try to bring in a lot of girls from local high schools and girls from our college as well who maybe have never programmed before and help them get started. My first summer at Twitter was just such an amazing experience, and I was so excited when they asked me to come back, and this summer has been even better, and I just love working there.
Christina, as you see the demos today, what are the kinds of things that you're going to be looking out for to give feedback on?
Presentation quality, how well does it work, and does it fill a need? Does it solve a real problem?
David, from a VC perspective, how do you guys evaluate apps and really people to invest money in?
I think it's all about, is the idea a big one, right? I mean, if it's incremental, it's just a feature or even just a product, that's interesting, but if it can really be a company that can be big, like that's what I'm looking for.
And Teressa, clearly Jenny went viral not just because she made a great product, but it was really her story and that sort of slice of life moment. From a technology perspective and some of the developers here, what kinds of things are press-worthy from your perspective as a reporter?
Yeah, she had a great narrative, but I think that it was really successful because, like Christina said, it solved a problem. I think that a great product is going to get press. I think that if we have something that is a real problem solver, that's very useful, that does solve a real world problem. I'm also looking for something that's like accessible. And the other thing I'd like to see is something that works and that allows brands as they move into multi-screen to be useful and make people happy instead of annoyed.
I want to give a shout out to Delivery Agent. They are sponsoring this segment. They have a really cool product. You can actually shop from your TV. So definitely check it out. It works across screens. It works across different platforms on TV, on mobile, and on tablet devices as well. So pretty cool there. And here is how things are going to work. We have 5 teams like we did last year. 4 of the teams are here. For the 5th team, we're going to have a proxy from Holliday who is mentoring that team at the MIT Hack. We'll talk about that in a little bit. For each one of the finalists, we're going to show a video demo. We're going to bring up that finalist. They'll stand right next to me. We'll have the judges ask them some questions, have them make some comments. We're going to do that 5 times. And then afterwards, you're all going to vote for which app you think has done the best job in decoding the future of television. I also want to give a shout out to our friends at DirecTV. They are our featured platform sponsor. They've also, 2 of the projects that you'll see here today are using the DirecTV API for that. DirecTV has done a lot in mentoring students by sponsoring hackathons throughout, which is really, really great. So with that, we're going to go to our first finalist. Finalist 1, Fantasy Live.
I'm Jordan.
I'm John.
I'm Steven. We're 3 students from MIT. We built Fantasy Live, which is the perfect fantasy app for people who are really into fantasy football. You get your real-time fantasy stats on top of live TV. You get tweets, and you can gloat to your friends from across the country, and they can't stop you. What we did is we overlaid real-time fantasy sports stats for a given individual's team. Here we see 2 people going head-to-head this week, and on top of live football, you can see their current score, their expected score during the week. For fantasy football, you sort of rack up points during the week, so we really wanted to display both of those. We also have their percentage chance of winning, and all of those stats are calculated, again, every 9 seconds. So they're updated with real-time data, which can be pulled from the NFL Network with events that are happening both in the game that the person's watching and in other games. With Fantasy Live, what you can do is you can tweet at your opponent, just as you would normally tweet at an individual. And if you include our hashtag #FantasyLive, a picture that you can tweet will show up on their TV. And regardless of where they are or what they're doing, that'll show up. And this is something that we enabled, hopefully, for people having like big viewing parties. They have lots of friends over. You want to sort of inject yourself into their party, but you're not able to get there physically. You can do that with Fantasy Live.
Well, we're glad you're here. Awesome. Well, I want to turn it over to our judges to ask you any questions. Let's start first with Christina.
Okay, so I love that you're doing something with fantasy football because obviously that, fantasy sports are huge. I have a question about, I guess, the implementation. How do you, what are you doing to make sure that it's not going to get annoying? If you want to watch the game, getting the fantasy stats is great, but I don't necessarily want to have my friend popping up all the time if I'm doing a viewing party, and I don't necessarily want to have this huge overlay in front of the content. So how are you addressing that?
Well, I mean, personally, I think part of the fun is having your friends show up on your TV no matter what. But, obviously you can configure whether or not things show up. So it's very easy. We use the DirecTV API. It's very easy to hide things. You can actually use the remote. to cause the overlay to go away. So if you want to turn off Fantasy Live, you can definitely do that. If you want to turn it back on, you can configure which parts you're using. Going into the far future could also add some smartphone kind of connectivity so that rather than just using your remote, anyone with a smartphone can do it too.
David.
So the thing I really like about this opportunity is that fantasy sports, people spend real dollars on fantasy sports. So I think there's a real revenue model here. But how do you think, you talked a little bit about the mobile connectivity. How do you think about, people already have, who are serious fantasy sports devotees, they already have one screen open on their laptop, one on their mobile, maybe an iPad over here. How do you think about the interaction between all that and you're adding another layer on the screen in front of you?
Well, I think I was actually thinking about this on the way in. One of the things that Fantasy Live does really well is it kind of changes the screen balance. So before, if you wanted to check your fantasy sports, you had like a game on, you had people around you in the room, and you were constantly checking your smartphone, which it's fun. Smartphones are great, but it makes you kind of less social. It makes you harder to talk to your friends, and really, I think in the end, sports are about hanging out with your friends. So what Fantasy Live lets you do is, you still use your smartphone to send pictures. You can still check your fantasy sports, but it lets you watch the game, and it lets you be more involved because your focus isn't as fragmented.
Teressa.
I kind of like the idea of extrapolating it so it's even more annoying, So it becomes this, somebody earlier said, everything's a game. This is a game on top of a game on top of a game, sort of. So could you program it so that your face could be on top of the players' faces or something, running down the field?
Could you do that? I don't
it's a
think
semi-serious question.
Semi-serious question. Okay, we didn't go deep enough into the DirecTV API. I think right now the set-top box computation power just isn't quite there to do facial overlays. But theoretically, you could overlay your smiling face whenever your team scores a touchdown, and we're pulling sports data, so we'll know when your team score touchdowns. So certainly possible.
Dave.
So at first I didn't realize it was through DirecTV because I was actually curious how you were actually getting this content onto television, so now I understand that part. But something that, as a person who deals with on-air graphics every day, something you might need to be worrying about, and this is more of a statement than a question, is screen clutter and how to guarantee that what you're seeing doesn't happen during the score coming up at that moment, because the lower left-hand corner of the screen is very busy. So have you thought about how to deal with the acrobatics of those graphics?
So, I don't think there's a perfect answer. We dealt a lot with this when we were actually designing the app, trying to come up with a way to be minimally obtrusive. One thing you could certainly do is, like I discussed earlier, just hide it. But barring that, you can certainly move it around. You can make that configurable. You can make it smaller. Disabling certain features, you could certainly use to minimize how annoying it is. But as a whole, I think having the app show up probably does more good than harm. And lower left-hand corner of the screen, you see some things, but we have a live sports feed as part of Fantasy Live, so you're not really missing any scores, even if there are scores on the bottom of the screen.
Anything else that you want to share with the audience?
Well, when we were designing Fantasy Live, I just couldn't believe that it didn't already exist. So I was really happy to be able to come up with something that I personally would like to keep developing and use. And it's just awesome to be here. So thank you all for coming out today.
Well, thank you for being here. That was awesome. Really nice job. Let's go to finalist 2. Finalist 2, Tweepy.
We're Team Hoya Hacksa from Hack MIT 2014. For our hack, we made Tweepy. Tweepy is quite simply an augmentation of the TV watching experience. Right now, watching TV is a very passive experience. Most people do it by themselves, sitting on their couch, and you don't really get to engage. But for a lot of TV shows, like Game of Thrones or reality TV shows, it's a lot more fun to watch these with other people. You get to see what they say, you get to see their reactions to shocking parts, and it makes it a much more communal experience. So our hack aims at trying to bring that communal experience to the TV itself. So how do we do this? Quite simply put, we want people to participate in a public conversation about the TV show in real time as they watch it. We do this by using the DirecTV API to figure out what show you're watching at any given time. We use that to synthesize a relevant hashtag, and then we start using our app to stream tweets about that show. This way you get to post your own tweets, see people respond to you, see what other people are saying, and you get to have some of that communal feel. In addition, however, it's really fun to see how people's reactions are and to get a sense of people's reactions in general. To that effect, we did a sentiment analysis on every tweet. That means we basically figured out, based on the words, whether a tweet was mostly positive or negative about the show. And so we use that information to color our tweets so you get a stream of the sentiment, as well as to create our centimeter, which gives an average amount of sentiment about the show in real time. This can also be really useful information for marketers or for the show's producers, as they can get a sense of what parts of a show people did like or didn't like.
Do you guys feel like you're on an episode of Shark Tank? Awesome. We're going to start first with Dave Perry.
Well, with that in mind. This kind of functionality I've actually seen. There's some smart TVs and widgets that are brought to you either by smart TVs or the cable operator themselves. Had you thought about that when you did this, or what kind of modifications have you seen, or did you apply to this that you may have seen before?
So what we did, kind of the added benefit of what we have is the sentiment analysis piece, and I think that's a really kind of useful addition to it, just getting like a really raw, quick look at people's reactions to the show. So it could be really good in something like Game of Thrones, like when there's like someone dies or some like really, important scene, you see like the meter going back and forth. I think that's a really added benefit. Another thing we do is like pull in real time what show you're watching and generate a hashtag from that. So then it's like even more catered to what you're watching. There are other applications as well that we didn't get to in the kind of short length of time we had at the hackathon, but you could do a sort of catered hashtag to only you and your friends. So it could be like hashtag Jordan and Janet watching Game of Thrones or something, maybe something shorter, but it would be something that you could have with your friends and make it a little conversation. So I think there's like a treasure trove of opportunity just with this framework in place.
Teressa.
Is the centimeter measured by happy, sad, bad, good? Just like if something crazy happens, that could be good. It could be a horribly violent scene, but it could also be awesome.
Yeah, so this is something that we kind of just, I use the HP idle API for. So what they do is you feed them in text, and they kind of return a value between -1 and 1 for how positive or negative it is based on the words in the words in the tweet. So if you use words like, I know we were testing like "I hate this show," it would come out with like a really, really red tweet versus like "I love this show." So I think it does like it looks for specific words and specific like phrases. So it's not something we dealt with specifically. But we did see some problems, like sarcasm wasn't picked up, for instance, so it's definitely something that could be worked on.
David.
I really like that it can really push the communal aspect and simultaneous watching. The question is, there's people watch TV and different shows at so many different times. How have you thought about that as either a problem or that could be an opportunity to actually sync up tweets, 25 minutes into a program so that you can watch with your friends, but not necessarily at the same time?
That is an issue. Most of the context we imagined when developing this was in the live setting,
yep.
Where, in theory, the volume of tweets coming from people watching it live would just totally overshadow any.
I mean, it could drive appointment viewing, right? If all your friends are going to be on at the same time.
Yeah, and that was a part of the added functionality of customizing the hashtag. But part of the fun is to have a broad whole viewer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christina.
So there have been a lot of startups that have tried and have failed to do this. They've, starting, I guess, probably 2009, 2010, there were a ton of these that were really trying to bring in the social viewing experience. Most of them didn't work out. I do think the aspect of having a hashtag just for your friends is really interesting. But I guess my question is, to his point, when you're talking about, appointment viewing, live viewing, have you given any thought to the fact that, as we've seen earlier, people don't always they might time shift things. So, I guess, you've thought about setting up specific tweets to come in at specific times if you know that people, here's a better question. How are you dealing with time zones? I'll make that simple.
I hadn't actually thought of that, but this could be a tool that's used in conjunction with Jenny's project from last year, using the same.
Sensing a partnership, see?
Yeah. I mean, those are other problems that we hadn't really thought of in the broader context. But I mean, if you look at how we're watching this TVnext summit, we've got our Twitter streams on the side, and there's been a good deal of audience engagement, and we've highlighted that repeatedly. And I think everybody would agree that this kind of live feedback really, really, really adds to the engagement. And even, like John said, I was surprised that this dip was not already available, and you mentioned that you think that it has been done. And that makes a lot of sense in that I think that having the Twitter stream is a really strong feature. But in addition, the sentiment analysis, part of what we were really interested in is giving the viewers some data to work with as well. So whether it's sentiment analysis or just some fun stats like we recently saw from our top tweeters or something, you could very easily add in that kind of data. People like to see data, and you don't ever see data unless it's very curated by a network.
Before you guys make your final statements, you can just do me a favor and just take one step this way, because I would hate for you to fall off the stage. We do not want lawsuits here at Hill Holiday. Any final comments that you want to make to the audience, guys?
So just in the scope of time we had at the hackathon, we only used tweets. But I think what's great about this idea is that it could be catered to any social media platform. We thought about syncing it to your Facebook timeline, for instance. You could have a blog or anything. So I feel like there's really a treasure trove of kind of different applications for this, and Twitter is only one of the options that you have available.
Terrific, guys. Round of applause. Let's move on. Finalist 3, Verse.
My name's Will.
And I'm Justin.
And this is our app, Verse. So its long name is actually Virtual Reality Sentiment Analyzing Music Visualizer for the Oculus Rift, but we just call it Verse for short. So the idea behind this project was, what if you have a song, say an MP3 file, and you wanted to visualize it while you listen to it? So how could you do that, right? So we designed this project to take the name of the artist and the name of the song as inputs, and then we scraped the text of the lyrics off of the internet and sent that to HP Idol's API, which then gave us back a score of its sentiment rating, ranging from -1 to 1, which in this case was sad to happy. And so using that score, and then by also analyzing the music further, we could shape the world around the user inside the Oculus Rift.
We wrote a script to take the MP3 as an input, and then it would analyze in real time the amplitudes of various frequency bands, so your bass, your mids, your highs, and then it would correspond those amplitudes of those different frequency bands to various objects, such as, in our case, fountains, where the fountains would grow or shrink based on how loud those frequency bands are.
We use a sentiment rating to create maybe the surroundings or the climate around the user. So if it was a happy song, right, say it had a positive score, then it'd probably be a sunny day, maybe a few clouds, something very nice and relaxing. Whereas if it was a sad song, then it would maybe be a bit cloudy with some rain. And also, because we analyze the song based on the text and not on how it sounds, then there are songs that sound happy but are actually somewhat sad and have sad lyrics. So those songs have maybe a dark sky, maybe rain, maybe no rain. And then it's sort of like a balance between the two, depending.
Hey, what's going on? Here you go. You're going to face the panel now. We'll start with David Beisel.
So I love the analysis and then the visualizations, and I can just see there being a real wow factor once you put it on. Fast forward though, how are people going to use this and really spend time with it? I mean, I could see it being wow for a song or two, but then how do you envision the next iteration or 2 iterations from now? how are people going to sit down and use this for a half hour or for hours on end?
So I think one possible application would be just sit down, have maybe your laptop open, have the song, put on the Oculus Rift, just relax and watch the show. Moving forward, we were planning, like in the demo, you were just stationary and you could look around. But moving forward, you could possibly walk through an environment and have different things around you react to the music in different ways. We only touched the frequency side, so I feel like there's a lot more different aspects, like maybe the beats per minute of the song that could show you that there are other things going on as well. And then by walking through the environment, you don't necessarily bore yourself because there's maybe different things to explore. Also, if you say particularly really like a certain track, maybe in the future you could save that and then revisit it at a different time.
Teressa.
Yeah, it's really interesting because now we visualize music with something called a music video, but that's created by a third party. That's their vision. So is this meant to be sort of music video by algorithm? Just your thought process behind this.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is sort of like the music video of the next decade. It's really a new way that you can interact with music and visuals in a way that's a lot more engaging than traditional music videos. Instead of there being a screen between you and the environment, you're actually really surrounded by the environment. And I think that really just adds an entire new level of engagement to it. And I think there are probably applications for this beyond just music visualization in terms of the ways that people are going to be interacting with media in the next 5-10 years.
Mr. Perry.
Just to David's point, I think the way to increase engagement possibly is to do a whole thing on Dark Side of the Moon. I think you'll get a really long engagement that way. But I think it's a really interesting idea, and kind of to Teressa's point, I think music creators would be hard-pressed to not want to be part of that process, and do you see that being the ideal holy grail of working with in a fully immersive music video experience of, as you said, the next decade?
So yeah, I think that'd be an interesting idea. And then also, I feel like with the Oculus Rift especially, there's so many different angles you could approach it. Sure, you could just be sitting at the using the application, maybe walking around and whatnot. But also, people have taken the Oculus Rift and used it with, say, an omnidirectional treadmill. And so, what if, aside from just using your fingers to control the movement, what if you actually walked through there and experience this new world around you to the song of your choice?
Christina.
I love that you guys use the Rift for this, and I think this is really interesting. Obviously, an MP3 is the easiest way, especially for a hackathon, to do this now, but if you thought about bringing in other types of music or even dialogue, because I could see it being interesting maybe to revisit TV shows, especially those that have audio components. I'm thinking like Sons of Anarchy, which loves to do those really long, basically, Sun Kill Moon does an entire track in the middle of, the episode, but along with dialogue and creating visualizations around anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely outside of the scope of what we did for this past weekend, but I think that's definitely a possibility. And the same way that we're analyzing the music right now for sentiment, we could do the same thing with dialogue and figure out sort of the general emotion of the dialogue that's being said and have an algorithmic way to represent that. And I think that goes back to some of the other points that you've been asking about. Do content creators have to create these environments on their own? I believe that a lot of the work, possibly all of the work, could be done on the algorithmic side, just procedurally generating these environments. And yeah, you could have music as input, you could have dialogue as input.
Now is your chance to address the audience, both here and virtual, and try and get some votes.
We were very excited to create this project, and I think that, especially towards the end, as we were wrapping up what we had for the demo, we realized that there was so much more that we could do. And we're, moving forward, I think that there's so many different ways to tackle the problem of, just listening to a song isn't enough. So, we're very excited we're actually a team of 4, but the 4 of us are excited to just pursue this project further.
Guys, thank you so much. This is awesome.
Finalists for PointMe.
Hi, this is Neville from PointMe. In the video, I'm using a device called a Thalmic Labs Myo, which is a sensor that reads finger and arm data. What we've done is we've taken this data and sent it up to a server so that any device in our room can access it. For example, the lights that you see are dimmed and turned on by the server through a Wink hub. The speakers are controlled through a computer that's talking to our server, and the shade is controlled by a microcontroller known as an Arduino, connected with a Spark I/O plug that is connected to the Wi-Fi to the server. The beauty of the system is that any device in the room can be controlled by the Mayo, from your TV to your microwave to your radio. This is the future of home automation. This is PointMe.
The team at PointMe is from the University of Illinois. They're actually at another hackathon today. But we have one of our creative technologists from Hill Holliday who was there and helped mentor them. So here's Rob.
Hello, hello.
Go easy on Rob since he didn't do the development. But we're going to start with Teressa.
So the armband,
Yep.
that is something that's a prototype that they made.
Yeah, it was actually on Kickstarter, I think 2 years ago, and it's going to be released pretty soon. So these guys had a dev kit, and they were running around with it. It was really cool.
And that's the thing that will control everything in your smart home from here.
Yep, so it's a device that you wear on your upper arm. It has 9 gestures built into it, but not only does it know the gestures, but it also knows muscle movement. So from those muscle movements, you can do an infinite number of things to control, any device in your house. And one of the things that I don't know if they showed in the video is that you can actually point at something, and it knows what you're pointing at, and from there you can control it.
Dave?
This is a hot topic, and there's a lot of people getting into this space, such as Apple and Google.
Yep.
What do you think is the innovation here beyond what they're doing, or is the point to get bought by them?
Sure. So I think one of the things that Apple and Google and Microsoft are really focusing on is voice recognition. The whole reason that they wanted to do something physical with the Mayo band, the example they gave me was that I think it was last year, Aaron Paul did a Microsoft video where he was playing the Xbox, and he would say like, Xbox on, or Xbox Titanfall, and him actually saying that controlled the user's Xbox. So they wanted to have something very physical and something that would actually control that was very personal.
Christina?
Do you know if there's a way to maybe set specific gestures to have specific settings on the TV? So if I, twist my arm a certain way, then the TV goes to movie mode versus another way, might be TV mode. Or the same thing with lights or other systems. Have they thought about that, doing not just controlling the devices, but controlling devices for a certain activity?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that they weren't able to show, because they didn't actually have access to the DirecTV developer kit at the hack, but they talked about how you could fast forward a show or rewind a show or actually like browse the channel listings using this device. So if you didn't have the remote with you, you could just point at it, maybe scrub forward or scrub backward, channel listings, all that kind of stuff.
Finally, David.
So home automation seems great until you actually are trying to control your home.
Yep.
I've walked into places and you don't even know how to turn on the lights, right?
Right.
A light switch on and off, it works. Can you talk about the learning curve? It's actually interesting that you weren't on the team, and so
right.
like, how much did you have to figure out, is this going to actually work or not, just if you want to turn on the lights?
Sure. So I think there's definitely a learning curve to it, but I think in terms of just not doing just on or off, but you can actually like control the dim of the lights. Maybe if you only want lights in one room on, you could just point at them and do it that way. I think there is a learning curve, but I think like anything else, like when iPads first came out, like touch devices, that was a learning curve then, and I think this is something that we're ready for now.
I know that this team's at a slight disadvantage since they're not here. Is
Right.
there anything you want to say to the audience to, I guess, help get them some votes?
Sure. So these kids are super smart, but they're not only super smart, they're also super dedicated. So they were from the University of Illinois. They drove 16 hours without sleeping to the MIT hack, did the hack for 24 hours, and then drove 16 hours back to Illinois without sleeping. So these kids are super smart, super dedicated.
There you go.
I'm pretty proud of them, yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Finalist 5. Firsthandland.
Hi, I'm Darren.
And I'm Ryan.
We're both designers at the Rhode Island School of Design, interested in designing for and with technology. Because of that, we spent 2 weekends ago at Hack MIT building a project that we're here to talk to you about. The context for this project is a near future scenario where the web and content is browsed mainly through virtual reality devices such as the Oculus Rift. The kind of idea that we had for this is to create an immersive experience for brands to engage with their users in a more immersive and genuine way. the main question we kind of asked ourselves was, what's more engaging to someone, clicking on a flat banner ad or strolling through an immersive oasis towards a created experience?
Right. So we prototyped this idea with BuzzFeed, who's actually at HackMIT and previewing their public API for the first time. And what we created was a sketch of what BuzzFeed would look like in 3 dimensions. So we were taking into consideration what their brand values are, which we identified as a ton of content showing to people in a really immersive experience. So what we created was this column of content where you see the last week of BuzzFeed articles spinning around you. And as you look up, you slowly ascend, and it's almost kind of a spiritual experience.
Yeah. So we worked with BuzzFeed on this. They thought the experience was actually pretty on point and pretty, equivalent to their brand values. And we're really interested in kind of extending the work that we did over the weekend to other brands, other experiences, perhaps building a virtual reality browser for the web or for brands, for other interfaces. If we had more funding and time, this would be something we'd definitely be interested in pursuing. So yeah, thanks for listening. Check out our website at firsthandland for documentation. All of our code is open source. So, yeah.
Thanks for watching.
First of all, it's great to see you wearing shoes today. A quick funny little story. So these guys sent in their demo video. We shot some at Hill Holliday. These guys, because they were in Rhode Island, they shot it themselves, and you weren't wearing any shoes or socks. So we decided we cropped that out. Just because. But we were wondering what your footwear situation was going to be today. But
yeah, that was on the tail end of another all-nighter, so
yeah.
it was like, lucky we got the video together.
Thank you for being clothed. Let's start first with Christina.
So again, another cool use of Oculus, but I'm curious what the point of using Oculus was versus maybe another wearable, something like Google Glass, because what do you guys think, I guess, from a design perspective, is the advantage of having kind of this 3D view of a headline if you're still probably going to be reading it in flat space?
Right. So the thing that's great about Oculus Rift is that you look around and the view refreshes instantaneously, and you really feel like you're in a 3-dimensional world, whereas Google Glass puts a flat overlay on what the rest of the world is, which you don't have artistic control of. You can't make design decisions in there. So Oculus really affords like a breadth of experience and a breadth of experience design that we can offer brands and experiences that you couldn't otherwise.
No, sure, but I guess my question is, if you're ultimately going to be viewing the content more flat anyway, I mean, like I can see you can kind of customize that from the headline perspective. Are you also then wanting to create interactive views for each individual page then at that point too?
Yeah, well, so although the images and the titles are flat, they're sort of like spinning around you, and it was kind of like funny how immersive it was, and we wanted it to feel like a really over-the-top experience, but we're imagining this in other applications where the content is totally unflat.
Okay.
And if we had more time during the hackathon to this was our first time using any of those technologies that hack used, so we'd love them to be, more engaging, visceral forms.
David.
Take advantage of it.
So first off, I think it was cool that you open sourced all the code and as well as talked about it. So I think that's really cool. How did you, if you have all this flat content, how do you imagine navigating it? I mean, and within that world, and there could be some unique insights there, I think, as well.
So we actually were really fortunate to be able to talk to the Oculus Rift development team, and they offered us some really cool insights about designing for motion. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they said is that being able to control your motion is actually kind of something you have to be very careful with, because otherwise you can get nauseous if you're moving in the reality environment, but your body is not moving. So what we did is we introduced it in a very subtle way, where if you looked up, the camera would slowly raise up, and if you looked down, the camera would slowly go down. Obviously, in more development things, we'd like to explore that further and cater that to the type of experience that the brand wants. Like for a theme park, maybe it's you're controlling the speed of the roller coaster or something.
Cool. Teressa.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have so many questions, and that was one of them. I wondered what next, like what you did after you ascended, which I guess goes to how gestures or whatever. But you're calling this an immersive ad experience. So a brand would create that experience to go inside of BuzzFeed or whatever the publishing platform is.
Yeah, so the way that we're kind of thinking about this is, 20 years in the future, 30 years in the future, when this is how all content is possibly consumed, we want brands to be ready for that. So for example, if Facebook wanted to make an ad where you can see all the connections your friends are making, and how you're living in this content, in a three-dimensional space, we think it can apply to all sorts of content, not just BuzzFeed, not just advertising. It's really a way to create, for brands to create a visceral experience for people anywhere, not necessarily as an advertisement or a video.
But it's really, to Christina's point, it's interesting for us to think about okay, you're in the site, but now the story itself is also a virtual reality experience. I've seen experiments done with that at film festivals that are really cumbersome and clunky, but bringing a story to life in that way, that once the technology evolves would be really interesting.
Yeah, so imagine for the Revolt TV people earlier, if one of their advertisements for something like this was being able to show the experience of performing on stage as the artist.
Are you trying to make a deal?
I don't know, maybe.
Maybe Andy Schoen's still here. Dave.
I think it's really interesting, and again, it's there's so much that people take from the Minority Report kind of way of experiencing content that I think it's a valuable exercise to figure out how people might interact with content. And people have kind of touched on, the vertigo part of it, and just kind of wondering if you have thought about this as a business model. Do you see yourself being a company that brings brands in and creates these experiences, or making these kind of open source toolkits? What's the long-term idea?
So if we had some time to really flesh this out and support for it, one of the things we'd be looking to do is creating an actual browser. Because it's not enough to just have these fragmented virtual reality environments. Where the value really comes in is the transition between these and how we link them to each other, which is what we really see as the way that we engage with brands, is that it's so much more captivating to see a three-dimensional path that goes down to this oasis than it is to see this flat two-dimensional banner. So what we really see the value proposition of is being able to say, rather than people clicking on this thing and then you see white and then the page loads and there's these images that go down. What if instead it's you're traveling down a three-dimensional space to something that's totally about your brand and what you want to communicate to them?
So the idea is a browser, more this is how you experience the internet through Oculus Rift. That's the platform?
Yeah, so we prototyped it with one of the advertisements with the intention that we'd be able to build this out into a suite of more immersive, more continuous products.
Any final comments, guys?
Thanks so much for giving us the time. We're really excited to work with this kind of thing. We got great feedback from Oculus, great feedback from BuzzFeed, and based on that kind of thing, we just really want to move forward with it and see what we can accomplish. So
thank you so much, guys. The team from firsthandland. You can take your seats. Before we bring up the poll in just a couple minutes, I just want to remind everyone that now is the time, again, both here and tuning in virtually, to go to TVnextSummit.com/social, have it loaded, ready to go for when the poll comes out in just a few minutes. But before that, I just want to make mention that our bottom two runners-up will be getting 6 months free of Spotify Premium. Our third place winner will be getting a year of Spotify. And Spotify just announced today that they have a new family sharing plan, which is pretty awesome. You can save some cash. Our second place winner will be also getting the Pebble Steel smartwatch, like our speakers got. And it's a great smartwatch and a lot of fun. And then, of course, our first place winner will be getting the $2,500 check. And here to present the check is Hill Holliday's Director of Technology, Steve Callan. Great, and now it's time to vote. You should be seeing the poll to vote for one of these 5 apps. Choose the one you think has done the best job in decoding the future of TV. You have 60 seconds, starting now. winner of Hill Holiday's 2015 TVnext Hack. It's Fantasy Live. Come on up, guys. Awesome. I want to thank our judges. I want to thank all the students that came out here traveling, I know from different parts of the area here in Cambridge, but also from Georgetown. You guys were great to do this, and we hope to see you back next year. Thank you so much.